saying that the meeting is being recorded. So hi, everyone. Again, welcome. Happy Tuesday. My name is Natalie Pardo. I am the program manager at Latino Built, and I will be your host for today's presentation. So we will be hosting our bidding and estimating techniques for subcontractors by Ozzie Gonzalez, as you can see here on this photo. Before I do dive into the presentation, I just have a couple reminders. If you are here and you want to receive CCB continuing education credit for this training, and you didn't indicate it on your form when you first registered, just send me a message, including your name, company name, and then your CCB number, if you remember it, to our email info@latinobuilt.org. I'll put this information in the chat so you have it there. Or you can send it through private chat too, just so that way we can make note and make sure you get the credit for this training. This presentation, as I mentioned, will be recorded and it'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next few days. So if you want to share it out to any folks afterwards, or if you need to leave early, it'll be there. For the presentation today, we are in a meeting setting, so if you can just remain muted, so have your mic turned off, and then also please place your phone on silent just in case you do have to turn on your microphone or it turns on accidentally. We won't hear any background noise. And our chat is open, so if you have any questions throughout the presentation, I highly encourage you to send them in. We will allocate some time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. So again, just enter them in the chat. And with that, we can kick off our presentation. So it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter tonight, Ozzie Gonzalez from P3 Consulting.
All right. Hello, testing sound. Can you hear me out there?
I can hear you.
Okay, qué bueno. All right, Ozzie Gonzalez. It's nice to meet everybody out there. And I'm going to be sharing a presentation with you today. That picture up there was when I was young and back in my summer mode when I used to be outside. Ahorita ya, I am sitting at home, been not going outside, and the sun hasn't been out until just recently. So I feel like I'm looking into a guy who I wish I was right now. Anyway, could I please have, could you please drop the presentation so I can add this one? So I can add my own? So
yes, of course, give me 1 second.
Ándale, gracias. So thank you, first of all, to everybody that's out there who's joining me today for the presentation. I've got a bunch of content that I'm happy to share today, as you will see, but I really want to give time for talking about what's important to you. So I'll leave time for questions throughout. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can begin our presentation. So let me go to the beginning. There we go. So as was mentioned, we're going to be talking today about bidding and estimating. And my guess is that everybody in the room is involved in the construction industry and is looking at potentially doing some bids for general contractors. That's what it's about today. And I'm going to do an approach to bidding that really looks at how you not only get a number up front, but how you make sure that you're checking back on that number as your project evolves. You'll see that's my theme of the presentation. So there's a lot of jargon in this world, in the industry. So I'm going to talk about I'm going to be throwing out a lot of terms. And if you see jargon you don't understand or would like to talk about more, just put it in the chat with a question mark behind it, and we can get into that as we get into Q&A. I know that Natalie is going to be following along on the chat. I'm going to do my best at just getting us through some content, and I'll check back and see if there's questions along the way. But this is what we're going to talk about today. So let's go ahead and get into it. We'll begin with talking about what a bid is up front. We'll talk about the difference between the bidding and construction documents, because those don't necessarily get talked about enough and understood. I'll talk a little bit about some mistakes that are made with the tools that are used out there, from the most basic tool like a ruler all the way to the high-end stuff. And I'll talk a little bit about what you can do to better understand how to use those tools and create your own cost modules. That's what we're really going towards. You'll understand what I mean by cost drivers and cost modules as we get into this. So, just very briefly, a little bit about where I'm coming from. P3 Consulting is a company I started a year and a half ago, but I have been in the construction industry for the bulk of my life. Everything from as a laborer working on homes when I was much younger to working in small to large architecture and engineering firms. So I've seen projects from the very small residential to industrial plants that are 1 million square feet of industrial space, and everything in between. So I come at it with a background in writing codes, policy, and doing educational courses. So I'm glad to know that you're getting CCB credit for this course. If you have a CCB license, I highly recommend you reach out to get that credit. Okay, um, let's get into this now. So responsive bids, let's be upfront. The first piece of jargon I want to share is what is a responsive bid? Because the first thing you can do to get eliminated from the competition is to have an unresponsive bid. So project managers always select based on who's got a complete bid, and that's what they call that, responsiveness. And that, first of all, means you've put it in on time, that you've given them everything that they've asked for in the forms, the signatures, all the required documents in the format that they've requested. And that's what they tell you in the bidding documents. But more importantly, that's the basic. That's to get actually, seen. But more importantly, once you're actually seen, you want to actually make sure that you're addressing the scope items completely, and whatever scope you're doing, you're making that state that up front, make it clear, cite your exclusions, and make sure that somewhere in your bid you're citing the reference documents that you used to base your bid. A lot of bid documents come out with a schematic design set, a design review set. It might be pre-permit. You might have a permit set. Just make sure that you're citing which edition of drawings you're basing your preliminary bid off of. And of course, the best bids not only have all these elements, but they also begin to establish the terms for how you're going to manage change of scope on a project. Because you all know every project will have something that's different from the design, from the specifications, something will change. So making sure that you have an established way to navigate change orders is really important. So if the general contractor has not already made that clear to you in their bid documents or in their general requirements, then you make sure that you're addressing it in your bid documents. So that's some stuff to keep in mind. And again, I'm flying by a lot of terms, a lot of kinds of ideas to think about. But don't worry, an hour is not enough to do all this, but I will end with some resources along the way. Let's see here. So from responsiveness, I think the next important thing to consider is the documents themselves. Let's look at bid documents for a second. Bid documents include all those things that you see here on the screen. And I'll just give each one of those just a quick pass so we're on the same page. The bid documents are what you access through those links that GCs will provide you. Some of them put it on their websites. Sometimes other GCs use things like Building Connected or other sorts of or Procore or other systems where you access bid documents. Sometimes they'll email them to you, or you can go to a plan center. But anyway, this is what they have. The bid instructions are the things that tell you, when is it due, what signatures, what forms, what format are they looking for. Inside of the bid instructions is a scope description, and this is the thing that you're going to be bidding on. Remember, even if you're not going to bid on the entire scope, it's important that you say something about the entire scope description. That's how you begin to differentiate the breakout part that you're going to do, and make it clear all the other parts you're not going to do, because that's as important. It usually includes some version of design documents, and this is again what you're basing your bid off of. You look at the title block of those design documents, you're going to see what date they were drawn by, what version they might be, and very important, look for things like issue for construction, issue for permit, or look for things like if it's schematic design or design development. That way, you know that you're basing your bid off of a document that is either a young little hatchling that hasn't fully matured, or something that is already permitted and is very likely to stick to what it's going to be. It's more rigid. So, make sure your bid has the same level of flexibility that those design documents have. And then, of course, specifications. This is usually that PDF document that is hundreds of pages long, has a lot of outline gobbledygook, a lot of technical language. We'll talk a little bit about what's important in those specifications in a sec, but there's a lot of really critical stuff that impacts your bid in specifications. I'm going to take a sip of water and continue on. Give me a sec. Is there any questions or things coming up in the chat yet? I know I'm just going a mile a minute.
Nothing yet, but I'll let you know.
Okay. Next, I'll talk now. I talked a little bit about the bid documents. Now let's talk a second on what are construction documents, because bid documents help you get that preliminary estimate. Construction documents are a bigger umbrella, and you see bid documents on the screen because it's just one piece of that puzzle. The subcontract that you sign becomes part of the construction documents. Basically, everything that lives inside of that project becomes part of what you call the construction documents. It's essentially your paper trail. It begins with your subcontract, and it will reference the bid documents that you use to make your initial estimate. And how you built your subcontract a lot of times is around your bid documents. It also will include your construction drawings, which, mind you, are going to be the latest edition of those design documents. They will have what was permitted, what was approved by the client, by the design team, by the engineers, what was stamped by licensed professionals, and what essentially the inspectors will be looking for when it's time to close out for final inspection. And so those become the right things that you want to make sure you're using when you finish, before you finish your work. And we'll talk about that in a sec again. I've mentioned specifications. They're going to come up a lot. It's that big old document. They're divided up in CSI divisions. And if you're not familiar with CSI divisions, it's important that you get to know at least the one you live in. Most people, if you're in the flooring business, you're going to be in Division 9 finishes. But that doesn't mean you don't look at some other divisions. And I'll talk a little bit about other divisions that relate to all trades in addition to the one that you have to look at. And then, of course, there's other things that you might come across in projects. This comes into play more so on commercial and public work, less so on residential. But you have things like shop drawings, submittals, and what we call in the industry RFIs, RFCs, and COs. And that simply means requests for information, requests for clarification, or change orders. You might be on projects that use other terminology like request for scope change or something like that, or a scope change request. But essentially, those last two bullets talk about everything that happens in the field, in the real world, as you figure out what the real existing conditions are of that soil, or you figure out that those columns are not actually straight up and down as the drawing suggested. Those sorts of things are what come into play. Yeah, though happy to talk about what any of those things are. So I'm just going to kind of carry along. But the important thing is to know that your construction documents are going to be your entire paper trail, and make sure you're using your issue for construction design set. All right. Time check. I know that this time can fly by. So with estimating tools, I think I'm going to take a deep breath and slow down just for a sec now, because I know that we've got 60 minutes. Are there any questions in the chat? I'm going to try to see if I could pull up stuff.
We actually do.
Oh, good.
Yes, so Nicole did ask, which set of documents, bid documents or construction documents, should you establish your price from?
Perfect. That's such a great question. I mentioned in the beginning that, the price, estimating is not just the price you make up front. It's also how you let your price follow the life of the project. And as changes come on the project, you're going to have to adjust your price. So when you make your first price, you're going to be using your bid documents. You're going to be using whatever they provided you in that early stage. And as you learn more, because they issue a permit set, let's say they finally receive that permit down the line, or the client finally approves the design, whatever it may be, they're going to issue updated versions. So it's important to find critical updated versions like the permit set, the issue for construction set. And when you get those, look back on your bid and compare it against your bid documents. And that's when you should start finding, well before you go to the field, as soon as you can get those drawings in your hot little hands, look at them and see if there's differences, and start writing up the questions for the design team. Hey, is different now? Is this going to be an addition to my scope, or is someone else picking up that scope? Or these are noted differences. Sometimes they will point them out to you, and you follow the right drawing, you go to the clouded set, and you get that revision. But it's also good for you to look at them and make sure that things are the same. And you should always be bringing your number back up to speed, up to date. So the short answer is both.
That's the only question we have at this moment.
Bueno. Okay. So did I stop sharing, or what's happening?
I think you did.
Oh.
You might just want to
I see.
reshare.
All right, I'm going to go back. I just tried to open the chat so I could see what was happening, and it closed my sharing. So here we go. So let's talk a little bit about the estimating tools now, because this is where the real magic is of how you take those bid documents and you come up with your numbers. So far, I've kind of talked about just how to protect your number and make sure your number is able to change with project. But now let's talk for a second about how people are using tools out there and misusing tools to get to their number, and what you need to do to fill in the gaps. So here's the different kinds of estimating tools that exist out there. From the old school, we've got rulers and calculators and scales. You're always going to have those drawings, those magic construction drawings, plans, sections, details, all important. And that's one of the first tools you have in order to really start understanding the project. The drawings are your first line of defense. Before you use a ruler or a scale, it's going to be important that you use the drawings themselves and what they tell you directly. Beyond that, we have PDF readers, and this is like Bluebeam is a PDF reader. Adobe Acrobat is a PDF reader. Bluebeam is a software that adds a little bit of extra for the construction industry. It lets you find square footages. It lets you take a read of a drawing and figure out how far something is. So that's a tool that exists out there. So, it's like a digital ruler. Pretty useful when you're looking at drawings, which are pretty much in PDF these days. And then you have BIM schedules. BIM is like Revit or 3D software that is used. BIM means building information modeling. So it's 3D models. And that's, the newer, the larger projects are using that. I recommend you get familiar with BIM if it's not in your little, wish list on your bucket list. This is one of those areas where you will see the industry move as we design more in 3D. BIM schedules are actual readings from the model. So it tells you exactly how much square footage of wall there is, so that you know exactly how much you need to paint, for example. Um, and it's telling you off of the 3D model, the same one the design team is using, the same one the construction team is using. So anyway, that's pretty sophisticated stuff, but BIM schedules are really useful. That requires that you are able to receive 3D models and tinker with them, essentially. That software is not cheap, nor are the people that know how to use it, but it's a good tool to use. Just putting it out there. And then, of course, we go back to the other pieces of tools. This is not what the construction and bid documents tell you. This is what the world tells you. The last two are market indices, and this is like, what's happening in the market. So, we've had some pretty bumpy years in the construction industry. If it's not new tariffs coming into play, it's pandemics shutting down factories around the globe. Things that happen in the real world. We had the Suez Canal blocked up recently. I hope it didn't affect any of your projects, but it very well could have. These are the things that we have to be aware of. So anyway, market indices are things that look at, what's the cost of wood in the Midwest. If you're doing a project in the Midwest, there's places you can go to look at that. And then, of course, the best resource when you're looking outside is your supply chain. So never mind what wood costs in the Midwest. Talk to the person that you're going to buy the wood from in the Midwest and see what it costs there. Because those sorts of things are really what are affecting your project. So, those are the things. I'm seeing some questions coming through, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to try to sprinkle them in here. Let me see here. Where can I find info on how to calculate prevailing wage into square foot? So prevailing wage information, there is a central database. They update it, I think, every year. Boley has prevailing wage information. They're a good resource. I recommend you get it from them. You can Google prevailing wage in Oregon, in Portland Metro, and find some prevailing wage tables. Projects can supply you with prevailing wage tables. Sometimes they'll calculate them for the project and provide those as bid documents, or you can ask for them, as part of your bid process. They'll reference them many times. That's the kind of stuff that can be buried inside of specifications in some cases. I'll get back to that. What is the average amount that estimators charge per estimation? Great question. Call me because that's one of the services I'm providing. And it really depends. It's a wild market out there right now. There's not enough estimators. So it just depends on sort of how much support you need. I do that stuff. Holler at your boy. I'll give you some emails at the end. A ver. Okay. Let's talk about some. Okay, so before I go too far on the estimating thing, I talked about those tools. Whether it's a PDF reader or it's a calculator and a ruler, whatever you're using, let's talk about some mistakes, how you can misuse those tools. This happens all too often. The first and most important one is to use imaginary dimensions. Don't do it. Imaginary dimensions is like, you look at your drawings and you might see a dimension that says this wall is 40 feet from the next wall. And you might see another wall in the middle somewhere that doesn't have a dimension. Yes, you can use a ruler. Yes, you can use a PDF reader and it'll tell you something. But if you're going to put an estimate behind that, you take on the risk of assuming that that drawing was correct, that line was in the right place. Sometimes they won't dimension something because they aren't really sure where it's going to land yet for some reason, and that wall may move. So be careful when you take something off of a drawing based on the line work and not the dimension with an actual number. Those are important things, and that's a perfect kind of situation where you submit an RFI or an RFC. You make a sort of educated guess in your preliminary bid, and you have inside of your preliminary bid, you say something that you're going to be validating dimensions and validating conditions of the design as as part of the project. That's the kind of stuff that you build in. You can actually start asking questions once you're awarded and say, what is this dimension? And you could ask that question 6 months before you touch the project, before your scope even begins. You can ask that question. You just got to make sure to keep track of it, and you might have to remind somebody the question's still outstanding. But those are the kind of things that are within your control. Another mistake is to ignore the details. The details are literally the detail drawings inside of the construction drawings. There's sheets of detail sheets. And in those detail sheets, that's where there's really critical information about assembly. So, you might have your particular way to install a system. Well, you make sure that when you look at those details, that your approach actually will not conflict with the situation of the detail. Many times there are architects, designers. I'm an architect by trade, so I can tell you this firsthand. We're not the experts as much as you in how to assemble the things that you work on. So we might be pulling a detail from another project, and it might not be the way you install. It might not be the best way to do the job. So you can bid it and do it the way our detail shows, or you can do it and supply an alternative detail and say, this is how I'm bidding it. It's going to be different. There's a deviation here. So how you capture that and making sure you don't, if you're different than the detail is very critical. That's the beginning of you protecting yourself from deviating from the holy grail that is the drawings. So and designers appreciate that when you're able to say, I have a detail that I think will work better, or it's going to be installed faster, it's going to save some money for the client, whatever it may be. You have those opportunities. And again, you don't have to wait till you're in the field to be doing that stuff. As soon as you have the drawings, you sort that out. Okay. I'm going to check time again because I get into storytelling mode. The next thing I kind of started alluding to already is not asking questions in time, whether it's an imaginary dimension, whether it's a deviation from the details, or you might have another product from another manufacturer that you'd rather put in because you got better pricing. That's all good. That's all gravy, but it's good to, make that clear and request the approval. Sometimes your best bet is to give them a number that is exactly to the detail, to the manufacturer that they specified. And then provide an alternate and say, I can do it this other way with this other thing, and here's the price for the alternate. That really helps get people's attention. It shows you know what you're doing, and you've already brought value to a project. FYI. So I mentioned, oh shoot, hold on, bloop, bloop. So I went to, I spoke about the CSI divisions and the specs. Division 0, 1, and 2 are the ones that have a lot of important information. They apply to every trade, and you shouldn't ignore them. So if you're that flooring company I mentioned earlier, yes, you're going to go to Division 9 and figure out, all your flooring specs. Awesome possum. But don't jump past Division 0, 1, and 2, because that's where Division 0 tells you things the owner's asking everybody to do. Division 1's telling you things that the GC's asking everybody to do, including you. And Division 2 is telling you what you're supposed to find when you get there. So your existing conditions. And so long as you're on board with all that stuff, you'll know if anything has changed. Also recognize that inside of Division 0 and 1, you're going to find requirements for reporting. There's a lot of expensive things inside Division 0 and 1 that will take time from your projects. So make sure to look at them, because, a little thing like you must have 20% apprentices on your project. That stuff shows up in Division 1. And it's important to know exactly what the reporting requirements will be for that, what the reporting system will be. That's where all that stuff appears. So inside of your division, that brings me to number 5. Let's say you go to division 9 now, you're in finishes. That's where you're going to have a section that's called requirements. And inside of that, you're going to find out things that might cost money. Like you might need to have a certain year's length of warranty, a certain insurance coverage for your system. This is typical in the roofing industry, for example. Normally exterior envelope kind of stuff has that. So if you're in the interiors businesses, it's just making sure that you've got the right manufacturers, that you're supplying the right documentation. This is where you find out things like apprenticeship requirements. If the project is going to be like LEED certified or a green building, this is where they ask you for documents that you're going to have to supply. So all of this is work. I know it's not field work, but it certainly takes time and someone's got to do it. So build that into your bids. I already mentioned not using the permit set. So use that permit set. Use that permit set. That is important. So important. And of course, the next one, I didn't mention this a lot. Existing conditions. The moment you begin your work, if you don't say something, you have pretty much accepted your existing conditions, whatever they may be. So your field personnel, make sure that you know what the existing conditions that you're supposed to have. And as soon as you find any deviation, it's important that you document it and you begin that paper trail, that conversation, the RFC process for, what am I going to do? What would you like me to do about X, Y, or Z? Because, you show up, that column isn't straight up and down, and all of a sudden the window frame that is going to be ordered is going to present some, funky things. You have to make sure that before you start putting the window in, you've said something about the column, or, someone might not like it and all of a sudden it's on you, because you accepted an existing condition. You never said a thing. Those sorts of things are so critical. And mismanaging scope changes. Again, this is about change orders, about existing conditions, about issuing new construction drawings and them having new stuff. This is about something happening in the sequence of the project where somebody thought they were going to be done and they weren't, or something they did changed and that wasn't communicated. All that stuff is important. And this is why, in the commercial construction world, it's in how you manage change on your project and how you properly hand the baton off that will protect you in your contracts and your profit margins. And there's an art and a science to how you manage scope changes. This is an important one. Okay, I'm gonna take a breath again and see if there's anything happening in the chat. Parece que no. And we'll talk about cost drivers. This is what you got to build into your number. The first two you guys are probably very familiar with. It might be your MO today. You have wages and materials, and you know what those are for yourself. You have those numbers. The thing I'd like to mention about the two is that it's the direct and indirect costs. With wages, it's going to be everything, the benefits packages and the vacation and all that stuff, whatever it costs to hold that individual. Materials, again, is everything. It's the storage, the transport, the handling of it, depending on what equipment it may be. And if you're having to buy it up front because of lead time, it might be the financing of it. You might be paying an interest rate on that money. So it's all of that is the cost of the materials. So the next four have to do with the project, the real kind of conditions of the project. Site conditions can impact your cost by becoming something that's going to eat up time. For those of you that have worked in downtown Portland in the last few years, you might know that if you've got to move trucks of material in and out of that job site, you better be really careful about the traffic hours and plan a lot of time for your drivers to be sitting in red lights and stop signs. That's just because it's really slow to move a mile in downtown Portland. If you have a project in Sandy, you might have a lot of elbow room to access your project, to have staging areas, and to basically work comfortably. Downtown Portland's like a foreign car. You just can't. It takes half an hour just to get access to the one little knob you need to turn. Those are the things that are site condition related. What I mean there is, think about it: commute time, even accessing the site. Some sites are secured. You have to have a badge. You might be passing security gates. There might be a queue for the loading area. This is where you kind of want to know the GCs that are operating and look at how they handle the logistics of a site. There might be elevators because it's on the 13th floor, and elevators might be servicing, and it might take extra time to get your materials up and down. So, when you look at your bid documents, don't just look at the size of the job on the plans. Think about how you're actually going to get yourself like into the space and actually arrive there, because that costs money. The next one is schedule conditions. Similarly, of course, schedule is money. So think about how they've provided their schedule. Is it a really tight, compressed schedule? Do they have good elbow room? Because a really well-run project makes everybody money, but a poorly run project, it's really difficult to make money. So you got to have an eye for a critical eye when you're looking at bid documents. And again, build in the right level of elbow room for yourself that the design documents have, that their project schedule has. Because it could be really hard to make money on a project that's not really well documented. Project delivery method comes down to different types of ways you give the job. It's like a design build project is very different than a hard bid. Those are going to impact the number you're able to give up front and how you're able to coordinate what you need to do in coordination before you start your job. There's being familiar with different project delivery methods is very good. So just know that you should be able to look at the project delivery method and how they're handling things like insurance and bonding inside of the job, because all of those impact your costs. And finally, I've belabored this: administrative requirements. Those are the things that often take up people's time. And if you don't set this up properly and you set up your process, you end up waiting on that final payment and having to go back and relive 6 months of a project in document world. And that's no fun for anybody. So all of this, I'm doing a time check. Good. All of this brings us around to, I think, what we all ultimately want. I call it the cost module. I don't know what to call it, like, walking around. But we know it as, what is your dollars per square foot? If you're in the flooring industry, if you're in concrete, what's your dollars per cubic yard? Those sorts of things. It's your number, the one that captures all your costs. And in an ideal world, that number has all of this stuff built into it: materials, labor. I mentioned all that. Those are the things that carry all those hidden costs that I mentioned. But then they include your installation method and how you do your work. How productive are you? This becomes one of your potential differentiators. That's an important one to consider. The last four are really driven by the project itself. The first three you control a lot of, hopefully, and the last four are very much driven by the project. The delivery method is just going to be how you're expected to deliver that project, communicate the project, document the project, all of that stuff. the general conditions of the job that, tell you, what are your insurance requirements or bonding requirements, apprenticeship, whatever, what have you. Um, how much paper work you're going to have to do, that should be built into your cost module. And this means that you might have a dollars per square foot that you kind of start from generally. And as you learn about that project, you look at your bid documents, you're going to tweak your dollars per square foot, and you're going to factor in things like, oh, it's a compressed schedule, I'm going to have to throw more bodies at it. It's got a lot of reporting requirements. Well, I'm going to have to, add some FTE, some staffing time to that project. You could factor those things into your dollars per square foot. And then operating costs, that's, darn, I meant to put that one up top as well. That's something you should control completely. So in an ideal world, you've got your dollars per square foot that is the real number from your real company, with your operations, with your vendors. You've got the best numbers from your vendors you can get. You know how fast you can, knock down that job. And you're looking at bid documents. And if you have all of these built into your cost module, you should be able to go to the right places on the construction documents, on the bid documents. You should be able to go to the specs and find what you need to quickly give yourself a good number for doing a job. And, if you have a job that's got the prevailing wage, yes, you go find that labor rate, put it into your labor rates, and build in all your other stuff. That's how you add the sort of project specific factors into your cost module. And hopefully you can start turning around bids pretty quickly. Now, I know that this is something that I threw a lot of words at you, and there's a lot of things to consider. And I know that for a lot of small businesses, you're out wearing every hat that there is on your business. So I wouldn't want to leave you without resources. There's opportunities out there to have some help in how to do some of this. In addition to classes, I've put a link here to PBDG's calendar of events. In addition to classes such as these, you can reach out to the organizations like Latino Built, and there are chambers of commerce depending on where you live. There might be other organizations that offer technical assistance. There's small business support services available that will give you one-on-one technical assistance, and that might help you in either furthering your education, or maybe getting those cost modules tooled up. I've also added my website because one of the things I like to do is help our small business communities grow in their business and in their capacity. So I'm making available estimating support services. If you need help building your cost module, really getting an understanding of how to get your factors together so that bidding becomes faster. Or if you simply need help getting bid documents to read so you have your takeoffs so that you can start getting your estimates, I have support services available for that. So here's my information. I'll put my website here in a sec, or my email in a sec. And there's resources available. You might have heard of RS Means. That's a market index. That's a subscription service out there. It will tell you general data, and it's a really good sanity check, but it's an annual report. And I think anybody out there will know 1 year is old news for pricing of stuff. So, you use it as a baseline, not something you should be running bids off of. But again, your best resources are always going to be your supply chain and your past projects. So if you're interested in help, I would be happy to speak with you one-on-one. I'm starting to offer these services, frankly. I know that there's a need, and if anybody out there is looking to do more bids but doesn't have enough work for a full-time estimator, or isn't finding one, these are the kind of things I can help fill a gap for you on. So with that, I'm gonna be quiet for a sec, take a sip of water, and answer any questions we have time for. And I see we have 10 minutes left on the clock. So
Yes. So we do have the opportunity for 2 to 3 questions if there are any. I don't see any in the chat, so I'm going to give you a few seconds, minutes to enter them in the chat. I also did say if you are more comfortable just unmuting yourself and asking the question, we can do that too. So I'll provide the opportunity for that. I'll just kind of keep an eye out and see if anyone turns off their mic. If you want to verbally ask your question. Don't see any mics
Yeah.
being turned off.
And I'll send the reminder that this is recorded.
Mhm.
And you can grab the chat that is there. I think you should be able to save the chat. I'm going to drop my email into the chat so you can copy it. And if you click it, it'll probably have your computer just pop open an email sender.
Yep. And so actually that's my cue to start talking about everything else we do, which let's see, I saw a chat. Will you email us? I will touch on that in a minute. Nicole did ask, my business provides construction support, so permit expediting.
Oh, cool.
Would you recommend that these same techniques for estimating?
Nicole, if you're not too shy to turn on the mic, I don't fully understand the question.
Sure.
Happy to.
Can you hear me? Sometimes my mic is cracking.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I'm finding is I don't have any materials. I really just have my labor and really don't have, or maybe I'm not understanding my operations cost. So I don't typically estimate in a square foot. I usually estimate by the project scope. And I'm not sure what my market indexes or my peers are doing. So, but I'm interested in larger projects and need some insight.
So, okay. And so your business provides construction support, permit expediting. I think that, oh, I see you muted. So I understand why that wouldn't, is that right, Nicole?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, no, I totally get why that doesn't really work on a per square footage basis. Yeah, that's a different, that's a consulting kind of what I would call PTE services. That's more the world I live in. I think that for permit expediting, what I've seen before from other folks that do that work, it's been a function of how many permits or how many sort of code variances they're requesting. And yeah, that and the jurisdictions they're living in.
Yes, I certainly have done differences with jurisdictions, but the code variances, I think oftentimes I don't know until after it's been submitted. And then you find out, oh, you have to do this and you have to do that. So I guess that's what we're building now. As we do permits, we learn what we should be costing. And so I just wanted to know, I guess that's the industry.
Yeah. No, I've seen it with folks that do it like entitlements consulting in other areas. I haven't seen it as much out in this region. But I've seen it either by permit or they just do like rates, they do their hourly rates and they say, this is what I cost and it's this much for sort of counter time and this other price for research time. And they might, put out bids that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've seen. Yeah, but it is a very different world than the construction installation.
Okay, well, if you do have any other questions after this point, you can send them to Ozzie, you can get in contact with him, or you can send them to our email as well. Again, that was info@latinobuilt.org, and we can get them all sorted out that way. But that kind of concludes our presentation for today. So on behalf of Latino Built, gracias, Ozzie, for all this great information. I do have a short survey that I'm hoping you all could fill out. It's going to be a Zoom poll, so let me actually launch it right now. It should pop up on your Not just kidding. Zoom doesn't want me to do it. So I will be sending out a survey to all of you to fill out and just let us know how the presentation went and how it, how you felt and if you would recommend it again. So yeah, I'll send it out after this presentation. So
Hey, Natalie,
Oh,
it
yeah.
looks like there's another question. Somebody Paula Jones just asked a question. Wait.
Yes, thank you. All right, so Paula, we do have a question. We specialize in delivering excavation construction services as a sub, but intend to also bid as a GC depending on a project. What is your recommendation for MTO and cost estimating software? We have about a minute. Ozzie?
I saw that Carla jumped in and responded to Paula as well. Carla uses PlanSwift. I'm not familiar with PlanSwift. That's not the world I live in. But I certainly would recommend to connect with Carla.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right. So we'll continue with the presentation. Again, if you have questions, just send them in now, just so that I don't want to get your response be really, really short. So just send them in and we can get a response in that way. Thank you. I know the chat will be saved on our end, so we'll have it there. Okay, so I do want to let you know about upcoming events that we do have hosted here with Latino Built. So we will have on April 14th our quarterly membership meeting. That's next Wednesday in the evening. And then we will be hosting on April 20th our Learn How to Grow with Your Business Digitally in 2021. So that's a great opportunity for you to sign up if you want to know more about social media and all that there is out there. So you can register for those events on latinobuild.org/events and learn more information about that. With that being said, again, I've talked about our email, info@latinobuild.org is one way for you to get in contact with us. Our website, our Facebook, our LinkedIn, our YouTube channel, which like I mentioned, this is being recorded and will be posted. We also have a newsletter. So if you are not part of our newsletter already, I highly recommend for you to sign up for it. It's available on our website, and that's how you will get notice that this webinar is being posted. So again, if you're not signed up, I definitely encourage you to do so, because that's kind of the first way to learn about everything that we're doing. And final announcement, if you are shopping on Amazon, you can actually use the Amazon Smile, which sends a certain percentage of your purchases to a donation to a charity of your choice. We are on there. So find Latino Built Foundation as your charitable organization and add us. So every purchase gets a little percentage for our foundation. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone here at the presentation today. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday. That concludes our presentation. Thank you. Have a good one.